Now, let's be real, Warframe is a power fantasy. You're not just a space ninja, you are a cosmic demigod in a high-speed blender suit. Whether you're turning Grineer into smoke with your favourite weapon or wiping out rooms with whatever broken loadout you're using right now, the game is built to make us feel unstoppable. Well, I fucked that bit up, haven't I? Well, anyway, let's move on, right? Damage attenuation is a mechanic that cuts your damage in real time during boss fights, and it has become the go-to tool by DE for adding challenge, which I'm sure you've noticed. Your build is maxed, your loadout is absolutely cracked, and yet your hits are barely registering against a boss with damage attenuation. It's an artificial difficulty implemented instead of mechanics or maybe worthwhile boss engagements, which I'll get to at the end of this video. It has been around for a while, but with the Ileweaver update, it has been brought more to the surface in a bit of a big way. So what the hell is damage attenuation? Damage attenuation, or adaptive damage scaling, is not just enemies having more health, it is a system that actively reduces the damage that you can deal, especially if you are hitting too hard, too fast, which isn't a Vin Diesel movie. It first made its way into Warframe with Kuva Liches, then it stuck around for Sentience, Archons, and now with the hard mode Vor and the Fragmented bosses as well. Now the logic makes sense, at least on paper anyway. We had become so powerful in game that bosses were melted before their intro animations even ended. Attenuation was DE's attempt to preserve some form of pacing, spectacle, and I guess tension that's supposed to go with a boss encounter, but instead of giving us a challenge, it's kind of made us feel punished for being too powerful. Because attenuation nullifies build investment. You could farm your weapon and your Warframe 7 times, use the best arcanes, equip synergistic companions, and throw out absolutely insane damage, only to enter a boss fight and feel like you're slapping them with a wet noodle. It is quite demoralising. The Araxia fight, however, in the new Spiral, on the other hand, I found to be more fun. It had cool phases and mechanics, and it had, I guess, mobs that were spawning in waves, and what felt like slight damage attenuation. Meanwhile, the Fragmented fight, which closes out the new Deviri cycle, is a reused fight which is just kind of doubled up. And then there is the Elite Deep Archimedia boss and the hard mode Vor challenge, which was just added, which is much higher level and becomes these really drawn out encounters that are, in my opinion, really not enjoyable, which also makes some frames, for whatever reason, borderline useless. Mesa, Atlas, most exalted setups don't target bosses. These encounters feel like they reward cheese or shield gating instead of, I guess, the investment you've put into your build. If you take the new Vor hard mode, you simply lean into shield gating, ignore your frame's abilities in order to fight Vor to get those solo accolades. But to be fair, we know DE didn't just throw attenuation in for shits and giggles. There is a real self-inflicted problem in Warframe with power creep. Every new weapon or Warframe pushes the ceiling that little bit higher, and without checks, bosses quickly became irrelevant. A well-modded Felarx or whatever primary weapon is your go-to could wipe out those bosses before they would even lift a finger. Now, attenuation is supposed to give these fights room to breathe, to show off animation phases, enemy mechanics, strategic tools, companions, or even your gear items to show those off as well. So in theory, it is a bit of a compromise. You can still dominate normal missions, but bosses, they wanted us to have to think and not just shoot. But the execution kind of makes it feel more like your build is too powerful, so we're going to nerf it mid-fight. Now, Warframe isn't alone in trying to rein in player power. Other games do this as well. Games with loot, with power scaling, and of course with high-end builds, they face the same core problems. How do you preserve difficulty in a game designed around players getting much stronger? Well, other games have tackled it in a different way, and some might argue that it's maybe a better way as well. But at the same time, these games don't have the same power scaling that we have in Warframe. If you take Destiny as an example, they have boss fights like raids or even in Nightfalls, which are designed around big health pools, time-sensitive mechanics, or I guess utilizing team buffs in order to burn a boss down faster. So you can still pull off one-shot strats if you're using the right team, but only if your team coordinates, and I guess you earn that window in order to take the boss down. So the difference here is Destiny lets you keep that power, it just demands that you use it in a slightly smarter way. Monster Hunter is another game that will reward precision while not reducing your damage output. The idea with that is that you're going to hit bosses or monsters in a certain area because that's where their weaknesses are going to be, or whether it's on the head or on the tail. They also have resistances to certain elements which they're going to be weaker to. So damage attenuation doesn't really exist in Monster Hunter either. If you can burst a boss down in 5 minutes, they allow you to do it. You're simply being smart by hitting weak points, but also getting your timing right in order to hit those weak points and get the most out of your damage output. Then I guess there is another looter, which is the Division 2, a game that is notorious for having, I guess, bullet spongy enemies, but it kind of avoids attenuation as well by using enemy density armor systems, and I guess chaos by having more and more enemies spawn in and you having to deal with multiple of those while also having the boss in the mix as well. Bosses aren't immune to damage, they're just hard to kill because they are surrounded by so many different threats or even hazards from the environment. Enemies have layered armor. You may encounter enemies that have immune states while also having, like I said, multiple different hazards on the mission, while also elite modifiers on some of the enemies that spawn in with them as well, those minions. So your damage still counts. You will still throw out damage in the hundreds of thousands or even more. It's been a while since I've played Division, but I know you could deal a lot of damage. So the difference again is they're not suppressing your damage output. Again, these are just rough examples. Where other games will scale up the challenge through design, Warframe kind of scales down your power, which definitely creates a disconnect within the community. You don't feel smarter or better for overcoming the fight. It just feels like it was drawn out because your power was muted and you just wanted to get through it and get to the end. So it's not really enjoyable for the most part when you come up against a high level enemy in particular. Most of this is in relation to high level bosses with damage attenuation. And that's definitely where the frustration is coming from. Now, of course, there's no point in me, I guess, complaining about damage attenuation without giving some kind of how would you fix this. And you guys can let me know in the comment section below how you would like to see it fixed. We can all be armchair devs. We're not devs. The guys at DE, I'm sure, know much better than we do. But some rough ideas could be to only activate attenuation during specific boss moments, not entirely from the start, which you could then disable attenuation by completing challenges within the room, within the boss arena, flicking switches, killing elite mobs, hitting a boss's weak point could turn off attenuation. They could remove attenuation altogether and have boss fights multi-phased so that minions would spawn in one of the phases while the boss is out of the room. They could have a boss fight which makes the most out of our parkour. Maybe have it a bullet hell boss fight, something along the lines of Hyperion in Returnal. You could have a boss arena where you have to manage buffs and you have to pick up a buff in order to deal the most amount of damage to that boss as you possibly can. You could have an arena with collapsing elements like platforms, like fire zones, like hazards, shifting terrain, kind of like what you might find in Elden Ring. There's a lot of different ways you can make a boss fight enjoyable, and attenuation clearly isn't doing it for the community. That doesn't mean that they have to completely remove attenuation, but rethink it, definitely. Because players pick up Warframe to feel strong. They want to earn that strength through builds, through testing those builds, and of course time spent playing the game and I guess picking up more and more weapons and more forma and I guess elevating their builds up to deal that kinds of damage. But attenuation makes it feel like your effort doesn't really matter against the boss fights, which are supposed to be the pinnacle of some of the events in the game. So we've earned our power, let us keep that power, and when we break a boss fight wide open, let that be the moment where we've earned the right to deal as much damage to the boss as you possibly can, not cheesing a system just to make it feel effective or just to prolong that fight to make it feel like it's lasting that little bit longer. But again, this is of course just my opinion. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of attenuation. Be honest. Let me know how you would like to see some of these boss fights made more enjoyable, because attenuation clearly isn't doing it. Have a great day, have a great week, and as always, thanks for watching.